Alright, let's get started with graphing absolute value functions. So, we will start with the most basic one. Y equals the absolute value of x. So here's what it's going to look like. Let's say x is 1. What is the absolute value of 1? It is 1. So we have x is 1. The absolute value of x is going to be y. So 1, 1, right there. What is the absolute value of 2? It is 2. So 2, 2. So I think you can see the pattern. It's just going to go straight up that way with a slope of 1, like that. The absolute value of 0 is 0. So we start at the origin, 0, 0. But now, unlike a normal line, it's not just going to continue down that way. Because we're dealing with absolute value, y cannot be less than 0, because the absolute value cannot be less than 0. So when you have absolute value of anything, like this, y is always going to stay above the x-axis, above y equals 0, or equal to it, if you have 0. So when x is negative 1, instead of y being negative 1, it's going to be the absolute value of negative 1, which is 1. So we start going back up. Absolute value of negative 2 is 2. Absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So now you see what we actually have is sort of like this V shape. Or you could look at it as two separate lines that are going in opposite directions. So that is the absolute value of x. Now let's do y equals the absolute value of x minus 1. So here's a good way to start this. What would we have to make x in order to get y to be 0? Because if y is 0, then we can start right on this x-axis here. So in order to make y equal to 0, we're going to have to make x equal to 1, right? Because the absolute value of 1 minus 1 is going to be the absolute value of 0, which is 0. So we'll make x 1 so that we can start where y is 0. So now let's just increase x. If x is 2, y is the absolute value of 1, which will be 1. And once again, we just have this line with a slope of 1 going up that way, like that. But if we make x 0, now we have a negative number in absolute value. If x is 0, y will be the absolute value of negative 1, which is 1, so we start going back up. And again, we will have a line with a slope of negative 1 going in the opposite direction, the opposite slope, and we have that V shape again. Okay, y equals the absolute value of x plus 3. So, how do we get y to be 0? Y will be 0 if this whole thing in the absolute value is 0. So in order to make x plus 3 0, x will have to be negative 3. So if x is negative 3, y is 0. So that's where we start. And once again, we're just going to go up with our standard V shape. Slope of 1 going in that direction. Slope of negative 1 going in that direction. So you see here, what happens is this number next to the x, the whole graph actually shifts in the opposite direction. So we have minus 1, the graph changed by positive 1x. It went to the right by 1. And if we have plus 3, the graph went left 3, or it moved left. It moved along the x by negative 3, so it is the opposite. Okay, now I'm going to throw in one more thing here. Y equals the absolute value of x minus 2 plus 4. So let's look at the plus 4 first because it's outside of the absolute value signs. What this is saying is y is this absolute value thing plus 4. So y is going to be whatever this would be, but then the y goes up by 4. So because of that, our starting point is not going to be the x-axis. It's going to be 4. We're going to go up by 4 from there because y is plus 4. So let's draw in that starting point. We go 4 up from the x-axis. So that will be this line right here. This line is y equals 4. So that is where we're going to be starting our graph. And now that we did that, we got the plus 4 out of the way. Let's just look at this. In order to get y to be 4, remember not 0 now since this is where we're starting. In order to get y to be 4, this whole absolute value has to be 0. So that means we'll have to make x equal to 2. So we start at where x is 2 here. Now, if x is 3, we'll have y is the absolute value of 1 plus 4. So we'll be at 5, and once again, just the standard V shape. Okay, and let's do one more of that form. Y equals the absolute value of x plus 7 minus 5. So y is going to be 5 less than starting on the x-axis. So that means we're going to go down by 5 and start the graph down here. Let me just see. That is... There we go. Okay. That is y equals negative 5. So in order to get x equal to, in order to have y equal to negative 5, this whole absolute value thing needs to be 0. So x needs to be negative 7. Right there. And then just draw in your v like that. Okay, so that's all we're going to do here. But next time we're going to see some absolute value graphs where we don't have a standard V shape with lines that have slopes of 1 and negative 1. We're going to see how that can change with certain absolute value functions.